Hippo, not the animal, but the coastal city, was alive with trade and arguments. In the bishop's residence, the heat clings to every stone, and scrolls lie scattered across a desk like unfinished confessions. A deacon counts coins by hand, while voices in the hall whisper accusations that no one dares speak aloud. Where did the offerings go? Why can't anyone answer? The bishop means well, but the records are a mess, and the rumors are louder than the prayers. Outside, ships from Carthage unload cargo with ledgers and signatures, but inside the church, faith is tracked by memory and trust. But trust is fragile, and in a church built on faith, nothing shatters faster or costs more to rebuild than trust. From the That's Jesus channel, welcome to Coach, Church Origins and Church History. I'm Bob Baulch, and on Mondays we stay between 0 and 500 AD. Today, we're in 395 AD, when the church at Hippo teetered on the edge of collapse, not from persecution, but from poor bookkeeping. And a young priest named Augustine is stepping into the chaos to rebuild credibility one record at a time. What began as financial reform became a model for every generation that wants to follow Jesus with open hands and open books. Hippo, it wasn't the empire's jewel, but it was a hub, a gritty North African city where trade ships met theologians and where the faith of ordinary believers carried more weight than Roman decrees. The local church, like many churches in the late 300s, ran on trust. There were no accountants, no audit boards, no written protocols. The bishop collected offerings, he distributed aid, maintained the buildings, and helped the poor, all by word of mouth and memory. And that bishop was Valerius, a kind, devout, and aging man. For years, his sincerity was enough, but as Hippo grew, so did the flow of gifts and obligations, and the system did not grow in turn. Offerings were stored in baskets or in jars. They were logged only in recollection. Debts were promised verbally, and charity flowed without record. For a while, everyone assumed that it was working, until it wasn't. Whispers began. Where is the money? Who decides how it's spent? Why are needs unmet when donations keep coming in? The Donatists, rivals who already doubted Catholic integrity, used the rumors like weapons. Valerius wasn't corrupt, but he had lost control of perception. And once suspicion enters a church, it multiplies faster than truth can catch it. As one historian put it, the resources of the church had been mismanaged under Bishop Valerius, resulting in suspicion and ill repute. Another added that there was no evidence of intent to defraud, only neglect that fed the rumors. The reputation of Hippo was unraveling, and parishioners grew cautious. Clergy grew divided, and into that atmosphere of anxiety stepped a new priest with restless eyes and a relentless conscience. His name was Augustine, a former professor, a reluctant convert, brilliant, young, already known for arguing ideas into submission, but this time he wouldn't be debating heresy, he'd be fighting disorder. Valerius saw his gift for leadership and asked Augustine to help as a coadjutor bishop, a title that meant assistant today and successor tomorrow. Augustine agreed, and he saw the cracks immediately. The problem wasn't dishonesty, it was drift. A church that handled the sacred had grown casual with the practical. And Augustine knew if faith loses credibility, then theology won't save it. Systems must be rebuilt before souls can be restored. Now, Augustine began his reforms quietly, like a man cleaning an altar before anyone noticed that it was even dusty. First, he wrote things down. Every offering, every gift, every act of mercy had a record. No more "I think" or no more "I remember." The church's generosity would live in ink, not rumor. The deacons, already servants of mercy, became record keepers, maintaining books that any clergy member could review. One historian wrote that the record keeping introduced by Augustine set a precedent for the African church's financial administration. And then Augustine went further. Clergy could no longer handle offering boxes alone. Each transaction required multiple witnesses. Funds were counted and distributed with accountability, not with assumption. Augustine explained it simply: if you serve a holy God, you must handle his gifts in the open. Next came transparency. At regular intervals, the records were reviewed publicly, not as theater, but as a testimony to what God was doing. The congregation saw stewardship instead of secrecy. Trust, which had vanished like spilled water, began to refill in the cup. And the changes worked. Suspicion eased. The Donatists lost their leverage, and Hippo's reputation mended. What began as crisis management became cultural reform. Augustine's letters show how seriously he took it. The church, he wrote, belongs to Christ and his people. Those entrusted with its resources must give account in the sight of all. By 396, Valerius had died, and Augustine, barely into his 40s, stood as the bishop of Hippo. The diocese that once teetered on collapse now set the example for others. The Council of Carthage, it soon commended his, quote, regulations instituted at Hippo, end quote, and spread his methods across all of North Africa. Augustine never accused his predecessor. He simply proved that holiness requires structure and that grace thrives in the light. By the turn of the 5th century, Hippo had changed from a rumor mill into a model. Augustine's reforms didn't just balance the books, they rewrote expectations. Where once trust had been assumed, now trust was proven. Parishioners no longer guessed what happened to their gifts, they could see it. Posidus, Augustine's friend and biographer, would later say that Augustine turned public accountability into a governing principle of ministry. It was revolutionary. Other African bishops copied the pattern: written records, shared oversight, regular review. And suspicion, the disease that had nearly killed the diocese, finally met its cure: light. Augustine's letters from this period, they read like blueprints for credibility. He warns that those entrusted must account before God and before the brethren, not because mistrust is holy, but because transparency is humility in motion. The church doesn't own its treasure, it stewards the gifts of God. Valerius faded into history, a good man whose good intentions just lacked the guardrails that they needed. And Augustine became the bishop who proved that holiness needs systems and that theology without integrity is just a sound in the air. And if a bishop in 395 could open the books for the sake of the gospel, what excuse do we have for keeping ours closed? We don't have one. More than 16 centuries later, the lesson still stings. We've built cathedrals of technology and influence, yet some churches still fall for the same illusion that undid Hippo: trust without proof. We've seen it play out again and again. Hillsong Church facing financial investigation in Australia, the Crystal Cathedral collapsing under crushing debt, the misuse of funds at Willow Creek Community Church, relief offerings diverted in televangelist networks that were meant for missions and were instead spent on luxury. These are not ancient failures, they're just yesterday's headlines. And every time it happens, the watching world concludes the same thing: the church preaches light, but lives in the shadows. Augustine's reforms tell us that it doesn't have to be that way. Public review is not an act of suspicion, it's an act of worship. Shared oversight doesn't dilute authority, it protects it. Accountability doesn't shame leaders, it preserves their calling. When churches publish budgets and invite questions and practice openness, they do more than manage money. They model the gospel, because the God who calls us to the light never built his kingdom on secrets. But transparency is more than just a spreadsheet, it's a posture. And systems alone can't fix what the soul still hides, because this isn't just about institutions anymore, it's about us. Most of us don't run a church with ledgers and audits, but we do live lives that God has financed with mercy and lives that He expects us to manage well. We are stewards of God's grace, not stockpilers of it. We are funnels of God's blessings to be poured out on others. We're not safety deposit boxes to keep God's blessings secret from the world. God helps others through us. He uses His children, you and me, so others can be reached and fed and healed. Some of us mismanage what God provides, and then we wonder why generosity dries up. Others manage it perfectly, but never release it at all. Both close the pipeline of grace. Now, Augustine reformed a diocese. Maybe we need to reform our hearts, to open our homes and our budgets and our calendars and live until others see God's hands moving through us and not pooling in us. Because when we hoard what was meant to flow, we become what Augustine feared the most, caretakers of holy things who never let anyone see them. The question isn't how much we keep, it's how much we let pass through. If this story of Augustine's reforms stirred something in you, share it with a friend who loves the church enough to want it healthy. Go to thatsjesus.org for other church episodes and resources. And don't forget to follow and like and comment and rate and review and subscribe and share and favorite and repost and heart and star and ring the bell and tag a friend. Or maybe whisper kind words into your device that's always listening even though it says it isn't. In short, just do whatever you can to trick the algorithm into thinking that you actually care about this series. But most of all, don't forget to tune in for more Coach episodes every week. Each one explores a different corner of church history, but on Mondays, we stay between 0 and 500 AD. Thanks for listening to Coach, where church origins and church history actually coach us how to walk boldly with Jesus today. I'm Bob Baulch with the That's Jesus channel. Have a great day and be blessed. Now, a small confession. Doing an episode about financial accountability while recording in my spare bedroom with an inexpensive mic and a computer that's almost 10 years old looks like I could use a few prayer requests. But honestly, I'm just hoping for enough subscribers to break even one day. This is a ministry more than a business. But seriously, what really matters here is this. Yesterday, my wife Wendy and I were discussing how many people don't leave churches over money. They leave when they feel unheard, when they feel left out regarding what's happening with the budget. They feel manipulated and exploited and taken advantage of, like a stooge who gives, but never gets to see where the gifts go or whether they ever fulfill their intended purpose. They aren't interested in exactly which church member lost their job and needed their car note paid for the month. They aren't interested in whose refrigerator stopped working and had all of their spoiled food replaced, or which person on staff is getting special counseling just to make it through the holidays. But they do want to know that their offering is helping people, even if no name is tied to it. Augustine didn't fix a budget. He restored belonging. And maybe that's our calling too, to make a space for honest questions and open books and open hearts, because movements don't start with wealth. They start with people who refuse to keep grace to themselves. Okay, rambling over again. Have a great day and be blessed.